UCF's tournament hopes are still holding on, but by a thread.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. Joining me for the first word on this topic, but from the last word on sports, is the man, the myth, the legend, Andrew Gluco. Andrew, before we started recording, we talked about it. There is a shred of hope that UCF could make the offseason. It started with beating the Utes, who, by the way, fired their coach after the win. We did not talk about the firing. But look, Johnny Dawkins has to get some positive momentum going headed into the Big 12 tournament. Beating the Utes was a step in the right direction, and K-State is up next. But before we talk about K-State, let's talk about where the bracketology stands on the Utes. They're like 78 in the net.
Yeah, they're well. First things first, legend in my own mind. Second thing, let's talk about the NIT bracketologies out there. And there's two main ones. The Barking Crow always has a good one, and D Ratings has another really good one. Barking Crow has UCF, barely in right now, as one of the bottom teams in the NIT still. D Ratings, UCF's fallen out. There's always that possibility of bubble teams falling off, spots getting taken that would not have been expected. I mean, when these conference tournaments start, things happen. Hold on to your seat. But UCF just has to keep winning. That's the goal here is you just got to keep winning. You have a win against Utah, which is still, in the 70s for the net, Kansas State at 81, TCU at 74, Oklahoma State still at 101. So these are all lower echelon games as far as the Big 12 is concerned. It's still not a pushover game. And then you have West Virginia to wrap it up. I know you had a crossover earlier to talk about that West Virginia game to close out the season. I'll tell you one thing. If UCF somehow manages to steal that, which is going to be a quad one game, that really helps their chances. But they got to keep winning these lower games, as for lack of a better term. It's the only way they're going to get a sniff at the NIT. At this point, they burned out all the goodwill they possibly have. They're 3-9 against quad one teams, and now they're up to 2-4 in quad two. They can't afford any losses, and so Kansas State up next. They're 13-14. Not a great team, but you know what? You can say the same thing about UCF. Not a great team, good talent, but just can't put it together. This game is a home game, so they do get the home court advantage. We'll talk. We'll break that one down a little bit, but I mean, the truth is, there is no margin of error for this team if they want to, smell the postseason. They got the first one out of the way. They squeaked out a winner against Utah, and yeah, Utah fires their head coach. Not the first time UCF athletics has led to a coach losing his job. When UCF beat Alabama in 2000, Mike DeBose was immediately fired. After UCF lost to South Carolina in 2015, after that game, Steve Spurrier quit. He was so like, this is awful. I'm done coaching. And he hasn't gone back. So not the first time UCF has led to a coach leaving his post, either voluntary or involuntary. I'm just saying.
Andrew, I had a listener reach out to me. He said, watching you and Andrew was the first time I had heard of this other postseason basketball tournament, not the NIT, as a possible landing destination for UCF after the regular season is over and the Big 12 tournament is over. Explain to our listeners again what this tournament is, sponsored by Fox.
Okay, well, this is called the College Basketball Crown. It's a brand new tournament. It's being sponsored by Fox, and the only teams eligible are Fox conference properties.
There you go.
The Big 10, the Big East, and the Big 12. So the way that's angling to look, and based on the agreement, is they're actually sitting for those 3 conferences only. They're sandwiching themselves in between, so there'll be the sandwich tournament between the NCAA tournament on the top and the NIT in the bottom, and they'll take teams in the middle. So it'd be 1 NIT or 1 NCAA, 2 the Crown, and 3 NIT. So that's why teams like Utah and UCF are being considered for the NIT all the way down, when there's really only probably 8 to 9 teams from the Big 12 going to the NCAA tournament. There's a gap there. That's where the college basketball crown comes into play, and those teams that missed the boat, but still had an okay run, they'll get picked up. So it allows lower ranked teams in these 3 conferences, these 3 power conferences, because for basketball, Big East is a power conference. Let's not mince words on that. It allows lower teams in those conferences to still get respectable postseason opportunity, because there's the NIT still wants power conference teams, so they're still going to look at the Big 10. They're still going to look at the Big East. They're still going to look at the Big 12, but they have to play second fiddle to the college basketball crown because of the deal that these conferences have with Fox.
Thank you for educating our listeners on that. A lot of people, again, it wasn't more than just one listener. Everybody was like, what's this new tournament? It's Fox properties only that will be involved. My last question on this is there real money involved here in the postseason for these teams participating in this new tournament?
There has to be something in there. Fox is going to make money on this tournament. These conferences are going to make money on this tournament. Even with the NIT, there's opportunities there too, because the NCAA does own the NIT. They bought it a handful of years ago, and so it's theirs. That's when they start changing the rules for auto bids and stuff like that. It's not a pay to play, and it's not like the CBI or those where there really isn't real money to be had there. It's just a chance to play. So this is the benefit of being in a power conference. We've talked about, here and there, especially in the football season, about the rise in expectations. Well, it also leads to rises in opportunity. And this is one of those rise of opportunity, is you're being included as a member of the Big 12 in this, I would say, almost exclusive basketball tournament that is loaded with power conference teams. Now, while UCF's not going to make the crown this year, they're just too far down the pecking order. It doesn't seem very likely. That does open the door for the NIT still, and that's still a respectable tournament. I know some people are, NCAA or bust, but I mean, it also depends on where your program is. This has been a rough year. The NIT would be a really good consolation prize if they manage to pull it off.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely would be a great consolation prize. But hey, look, if you're UCF, beggars can't be choosers. Hopefully any postseason basketball would be a chance for Johnny Dawkins to continue showing alumni administrators that he's the man to lead this team into next year. But look, before you get there, you got to play K-State. We're going to talk about that game and preview that one more time with my guy Andrew after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Postseason basketball is here. The NBA is here, and you should get in on the action. There's no place better to do it than at FanDuel. With FanDuel, you can get a chance to place your bets live. So even if you miss opening tip-off or you want it to be on the fourth quarter of a comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. New FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com and join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel.com. Andrew, K-State is up. And it strikes me when you look at where UCF stands in scoring, the fifth in the conference at 78.6 points per game. The number 1 team in the conference is only scoring 81 points per game. So it's where UCF at is somewhat of a statistical anomaly with these breakdowns at the end of the games. So we've talked to death about depth being an issue for UCF. At the one deep, you're really, really, really good. If the averages hold here, I told my friend Christian over at Locked On Wildcats, this is a game UCF should and will win.
Kansas State, and I'm using Sports Reference for my source. It's a good source for college basketball, for college football, for Division I stuff. And Kansas State ranks 230th in scoring, according to them, at 72.5 points a game. Not a whole lot, but their defense at 139th is only giving up 70.5. Conversely, let's switch over. UCF's offense, 62nd at 78.9. But their defense is 80.3 points a game, good for 350th. They are one of the worst defensive teams in the country. They are bad. They are horrifically bad. They are. This is a team that shoots a lot but doesn't hit a lot. They're 314th in field goal percentage at 42.2%. They are. Overall, that's 310th in 2-point at 48.1, and then 215th at 3-point, 33.5%. So this is not a good. UCF's not been a good shooting team. They get multiple chances to make buckets. One of the things that they are really good at, though, is not turning the ball over. UCF only gives about a little over 12 turnovers a game. It's in the top 150. And Kansas State's very similar, but they don't really capitalize on it. Kansas State is they shoot better than UCF, but they don't shoot as much as UCF, and they don't score as much. Their leading point scorer is David Ngessen, and he's under 13 points a game. He's at just a sliver under 12.9. So this is not a heavy scoring team on the surface, but UCF seems to have a habit of making teams play out of their freaking minds, scoring lots of points. You have 4 players on the Wildcats who do average double figures. Conversely, you have 4 for UCF, but again, that X factor, Keyshawn Hall, is he gonna bring, the 40-point monster, that he had earlier this year, that kind of day? Or is he going to be like he did in the first half against Utah, where he had 1 point on a made free throw and was like 0 of 6 from the field? Which version of Keyshawn Hall are you going to get? Because they need a guy who can step up. And while it's important to have the other role players step in when things aren't going well, and for once that happened with Jordan Ivory Curry coming off the bench, having a really solid game. The other players, like a Mikey Williams and a JJ Taylor and a Benny Williams, these guys have struggled mightily throughout the season. We saw sparks of greatness, but nothing consistent. And if they want to end the season in the postseason, they got to find a degree of consistency. And you're just not seeing it outside of a few guys. Mustafa Sham had a great game against Utah. He was pretty much unstoppable, and he stepped up big time when Hall just couldn't hit the side of a barn. They're gonna need to be hitting on all cylinders, because it only takes one loss here and it's over. It really is.
You talked about David Ngessen versus Arizona State, 8 of 13 from the field for 20 points, 13 rebounds, smooth double for David. If you're UCF, you do have to break that habit of making stars into superstars whenever some team comes to play you. So hopefully they can do that. Only one other player in double figures for K-State versus Arizona State. That was CJ Jones. He scored 10 points on 4 of 11 shooting. Now, I know they're not great defensively, but also Kansas State is not great offensively at all in my book. So this is a game you should absolutely beat these guys at the one deep. You not only match up with them, but you are superior to them. You have the superior primary scorer. I think that there are some things, facets of this game that UCF should dominate. And look, that starts with Keyshawn Hall, who, by the way, is the best scorer in the Big 12 this season. We're going to talk about Keyshawn Hall right next on Locked On UCF. Keyshawn Hall, as I mentioned, is been the bright spot for Johnny Dawkins. And before we talk about what he needs to do here coming up versus K-State, if you're Johnny Dawkins, can you hang your hat? Is this something that you can say, look, I know this season didn't go the way we thought it was going to go, but I still produced the best scorer in the conference. He's a Knight. He plays in Orlando, man. And we may not have been deep, but look at what we could do if I can find another Keyshawn Hall or somebody else to complement Keyshawn Hall, right? I think that this is a blue check for Johnny Dawkins this year.
Well, I mean, we've heard this song and dance before. Last year, UCF had, well, it was 2 years ago, had an outstanding player in Taylor Hendricks, who ended up getting drafted in the NBA lottery. And here's the thing. Same thing. We had a great player in insert name here, and we didn't get it done. But give it another year, we can get another. It's the same thing we heard 2 years ago. That's the problem. Is you have a good player and you can't seem to win with them. And while Keyshawn Hall is not as good as Taylor Hendricks, it's still no excuse. I mean, you gotta compete. You gotta be able to do something. And if you don't, you're gonna lose your job. I mean, if we had expectations, if we had a performance matrix that we had to do at our job, and we were not up to par, and we've had chance after chance after chance, we lose our job eventually.
Yeah. It's just funny to me because UCF is the only school in the Big 12 other than Texas Tech with 2 players inside the top 10 in the conference in scoring.
It's because the defense is so bad.
It's so Darius Johnson and Keyshawn Hall have been formidable at times this year. Mustafa Sham has stepped up at times as well too. We see Nivs Machovsky coming on here and contribute at points. But in my mind, I'm thinking go to the portal, find some guys, bring Mikey Williams along. I think Johnny Dawkins gets one more year to do this and show significant improvement. And look, at the end of the day, it's a results-driven process, right? Keyshawn Hall is a junior, so you should get him back for one more year. Empty the bag to keep him on your squad and get him back. Keep your best scorer and find ways to build around him. Darius Johnson is a senior. I'm not sure if there's a path to more playing time. Does he get a COVID year or anything like that? Does he have any?
I don't believe so. The one that I have circled as someone to question as whether they can get an extra year is Jalen Sellers. He played 3 games this year. He's missed the rest because of injury. He was top scorer last year for the Knights. So missing him has hurt this team, but they didn't have him when they had their early season run. Yeah. They had him for the very end of conference play, and that was it. He averaged 6 points a game during his 3 games, but also they were limiting his time because he was coming back from injury, and it didn't work out. The other thing you have to worry about is, can UCF keep Mustafa Sham? This is a really talented freshman. He's working on an outside game. He still needs work on it, but I mean, he's still over 30% from 3-point range, and he's over 7 feet tall.
10.3 points per game, Andrew. He can build on that headed into next season and be a 15 point game guy for
and
you.
there could be some power schools with some deeper pockets that are going to be doing some heavy tampering trying to get him. He's a good catch, and it's going to be difficult for UCF to hold on to him when you're going to have some blue chip schools go after him. It's just, that's the nature of college sports. When you have these guys, I don't think some of these other players, I don't think Mikey Williams is going to attract all that much, just because of his history and his output really didn't pan out in year one. I think a year under his belt,
I don't think there's enough tape
will
there.
help him. But Keyshawn Hall, that you may have some dollar bills coming his way. Sham's going to have dollar bills coming his way. UCF's going to be very hard pressed to keep this talent and convince them that staying in Orlando is in their best interest.
Yeah. What about Jordan Ivy Curry? I'm sorry. He's a senior as well, too. 13 points per game, 3 rebounds, 2.5 assists. He's shooting 40% on the season. Maybe that's production you can replace, but certainly the chemistry, the experience is something that you don't want to just, dismiss offhand.
Well, I mean, he's was a welcome addition to this team, transferred from UTSA. He's actually played at multiple schools over the years. Besides that, he played at University of Pacific, but this is it for him. He's played 5 years. He had that COVID year. And it's game over for him. So it's he's going to move on. He's had a good run. He did his job at UCF. He was pretty consistent. But UCF's going to have to hit the portal again and look for some of these guys to step in and contribute immediately.
Yeah, agreed. It's going to be a compelling offseason story, I think, for UCF basketball and Johnny Dawkins. One thing that we talked about on our crossover was the part of the facet of the offseason now where coaches, Andrew, have to re-recruit their rosters as well as go to the portal and find guys from high school. You got to convince your guys to stay because they can transfer as many times as they want. There's all the leverage lies in the players' hands now. And if you're productive, then you have the money factor where you've got tampering and other schools trying to poach your players, and there's all kinds of things going on. So Johnny Dawkins really has to start with, after you played your last basketball game this year, you got to sit down with every guy who you feel like can contribute next year and say, be part of the vision next year. Don't go. Hang in here. Here is the plan. Here's how we're going to get you help. And here's how we're going to be better than what you saw this year. I'm the guy to do it. Hang in with us here in Orlando, here at UCF. And if he can do that, and then he can go to the portal and find a piece here or there, it's easier to flip a roster in college basketball than it is in football. One guy can make so much of a difference, right? 2 guys can completely change the outlook of your team. And I think that, I had somebody say this to me, as I cover Auburn, and someone said, well, this is the same team that lost to Yale in the first round. I said, the core of the team, because there's fewer guys, so it looks like it's the same team, but it's not. It's not the same team. You've got a 5-star freshman at Tahad Pettiford. You've got Miles Kelly, who transferred from Georgia Tech, who's draining game-winning threes from everywhere. This team is different than last year. So you have a lot of the same pieces, not to mention the guys who stayed all got better. And if you're UCF, I think that you could have something similar where the core of your team, Keyshawn Hall, he comes back for another season. He's already the leading scorer in the conference. What happens if he gets better? What happens if, if these guys get better, they can get better. And then you can add talent to them and people say, oh, well, this is the same. No, it's not the same team. It is not the same. You can change the mental makeup of the player, Andrew, and you can change the roster by just bringing in 2 key pieces that completely transform your scoring, add points from the bench, and add defensive intensity. And man, I'm telling you, I'm fired up about this because I think that at the one, they were so good. They were so close. We watched what happened versus Houston. We watched what happened versus Kansas. And we thought, man, there should be 2 or 3 more quad 1 wins on this schedule for this team so far this year. If you're Johnny Dawkins, it's your job to get the most out of the guys that you have. And if you've drained every last drop out of the team that you have, build a better one in the offseason with the portal. That's just one man's opinion on this.
Well, one more thing. I want to add on to that a little bit, because
Sure.
I mean, you made some very valid points. People talk about Ohio State and how they spent $20 million on building this roster, which is a little bit disingenuous. They spent $20 million. Most of that was to retain their roster, and then they had a few guys to build on it, like Caleb Downs and stuff. But for the most part, it was to retain their roster. So I think what you said before, UCF needs to maintain their core and keep Hall and Sham and Williams and stuff there. Keep them there, develop them, and then bring in pieces. I mean, these players love Johnny Dawkins. Players outside the program love Johnny Dawkins. The media, nationally love Johnny Dawkins is beloved everywhere, which is why it's hard for the prospect of walking away from him, because the damage could be pretty rough to the program in the short term. So the other thing to think about, and this is one reason why I was not a proponent for firing him, last year, aside from the fact of the buyout, you're gonna gut your program, and it's already, UCF wasn't that attractive of a job because they haven't proven that they can be competitive in the conference on a full season. We've seen pockets of it. We've seen flashes of greatness. They beat Kansas last year. They held on with them. They took Houston to the wire. They played Arizona pretty close. They stayed within single digits there, and Arizona only won by 8 points on the road. So I mean, this is a program that has the chance. They have glimpses, but they need a little more confidence built in that the school is going to do what is necessary to build this program. And I think the first thing they need to do is retain the talent.
Yeah.
So to kind of put a bow on it, you go into the offseason, if you first things first, after you survive your dealings with Terry Mohajir, and okay, you're going to be here next year. First call is to your top players. I want to keep you for next year. Let's make this happen. And then, with the change going on in, with NIL and going in-house, you got to work with the collective for the first half, because until summertime, when they can actually officially make these changes, they're going to have to be the ones you deal with, and then they'll be absorbed into school. Because remember, the academic year starts July 1st. Before that, it's still 2024/25. So any of these big changes don't kick in until the 25-26 year starts. But you can't wait that gap to make these roster moves, because it's only a few months later that you've started practice. So you got to get most of your recruiting out of the way. So you retain your guys, get them locked in with an NIL deal, something that'll keep them happy, and then go look for some second tier guys that are a little bit under the radar. I mean, that's how they got Keyshawn Hall. Hall, coming out of UTSA, not a huge school, out of the American, but he showed that he had the talent, and he rose to the occasion at UCF. He just needs some help. They focus on a defender, focus on a 3-and-D guy, focus on improving on the wing and moving, because you don't have to have a traditional lineup in basketball. You can move around. You can have a short lineup, you can have a tall lineup. College, you have way more flexibility than this. There was one time when UCF have so many injuries, they played positionless basketball. And that's what Johnny Dawkins had to do because of what he had left. So, I mean, he's very versatile in rolling with the punches and working with what he has, during the season. But, they got to get that cupboard full if they want to make any noise next year. And the best way to do it is just start at home and then pick up the pieces afterwards, because you're going to have to replace a few important guys anyway.
Agreed. Look, UCF still has life in some ways in terms of building toward the future, and win the games that you can, re-recruit your butt off in the offseason, go to the powers that be. If you're Johnny Dawkins, part of your job is convincing Terry Mohajir that you're the guy to lead the program, and why, if they're taking over the financial part of NIL more directly. Your AD becomes GM, and you've got to convince the GM to spend money, right, on the roster that you want to build. So that's where college sports is headed. Again, Andrew Gluco from The Last Word on Sports. Tell people where they can find you.
Well, you can catch me on Twitter /X or Blue Sky at StatBoyDrew. And you can catch my writing on Last Word on College Football, a part of the Last Word on Sports family.
Guys, thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your second listen, go check out our friends at Locked On Big 12. Our guy Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and pulls no punches when it comes to talking about every team in the Big 12, including the UCF Knights. You can find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us here tomorrow, Locked On UCF.